Thank you, Madam President. Here in the U.S., the mobile app market represents a reliable, multi-billion-dollar payday for big tech. In 2020, Americans downloaded 13.4 billion apps onto their mobile devices. Needless to say, mobile apps are a key component of our digital economy. So it may be surprising to learn that this market is largely unregulated unless you count the influence of the two mega corporations that created it. Apple and Google have abused their power and used their status as gatekeepers to stifle innovation and penalize developers who want to work alongside them rather than ceding control over their products. Madam President, this is bad for the industry, it's bad for consumers, bad for the country. These gatekeeping tendencies aren't just a bump in the road for developers, they're a roadblock that completely closes off avenues of competition. Apple, for example, forces developers to use their exorbitantly expensive App Store payment system, which funnels profits away from the creators, and it raises prices for consumers. It is a take it or leave it arrangement. Of course, when developers do take the deal, they leave their relationship with their customers behind because the terms prohibit them from dealing directly with the people who use their products. They also have to accept that Apple and Google will not only prioritize native applications, but they'll take their competitors' confidential business information and use it against them. Last week, the Senate Judiciary Committee passed my Open App Markets Act, which is a bill we have worked some very long hours on. And finally, we're addressing the stranglehold big tech has on the digital app market. I really do thank Senator Blumenthal and his staff, as well as our co-sponsors, Senators Klobuchar, Rubio, Lummis, Booker, Graham, Kennedy, Hirano, Hawley, and Chairman Durbin for putting in so much time and effort to create this bipartisan piece of legislation. This bill will reset the rules of the road to protect competition and consumers by allowing consumers to access third-party apps and app stores, by prohibiting app store owners from locking developers into in-app payment arrangements, by ensuring that app developers are allowed to offer competitive pricing, and by preventing app stores from misusing confidential business information or app store rankings to disadvantage developers. If app store gatekeepers violate these rules of the road, the bill allows for developer lawsuits. It also includes safeguards to allow app stores to protect the privacy, security, and safety of consumers, as well as their own intellectual property rights. It's bipartisan, and it is a good, solid, strong first step. But remember, our tradition of maintaining competitive marketplaces isn't the only thing at stake here. This weekend, the opening ceremonies of the Olympic Games in Beijing drew in 16 million viewers. That's down from the last Winter Games in 2018, so hopefully this means that the various campaigns exposing the crimes and manipulation of the Chinese Communist Party are making a difference. But still, that 16 million people and their families are taking in Chinese propaganda. The Games' corporate sponsors weren't worried about that. They were happy to take advantage of all those eyeballs, and we know NBC hopes to surpass the nearly $2 billion in revenue they pulled in during the Tokyo Games. Protecting that competitiveness is important, but I would argue that protecting the human rights of people those sponsors and broadcasters are happy to sweep under the rug is even more important. And right at this very moment, big tech is facilitating crimes against humanity in China. Beijing is notorious for censoring speech critical of the communist government, but part of their grand strategy to silence dissent involves strong-arming corporations seeking access to the very lucrative Chinese market. It's not enough to offer an exciting product that you have to play nice with the CCP or else you're out. Can't be in their market. That means staying quiet about genocide in Xinjiang or violent repression in Hong Kong and doing everything in your power to make sure your customers stay silent too. The Open App Markets Act has received an outpouring of support from human rights activists who see firsthand how corporate gatekeeping actively endangers the lives of dissidents, activists, Uyghur Muslims, Mongols, Tibetans, Hong Kong freedom fighters, and other innocent people the CCP has chosen to brutalize. We received a letter of support for the Open App Markets Act signed by many of these individuals that I would like to share. They wrote in part that China suppresses nearly all dissent using its notorious Great Firewall internet filtering system, and through the cooperation of domestic and foreign companies, they are willing to block and remove accounts, content, and applications at the unchallenged request of Chinese authorities. Few American companies are as subservient to the Chinese government as Apple. Apple willingly censors dissenting voices and independent media for all in China and Hong Kong, using its control over the App Store, end quote. We received another letter from the human rights organization Great Fire that detailed specific examples of Apple doing the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party. They wrote, in part, that Great Fire, an organization dedicated to fighting internet censorship, started monitoring Apple's censorship in November 2013, when Apple decided to remove our free Weibo application from the Chinese App Store. Apple did not even wait for the intervention of any Chinese judicial authority to determine if our app had actually broken any Chinese law. It collaborated with the Chinese authorities and dealt with our app the same way it has continued to deal with many more apps, by enforcing arbitrary and politically motivated censorship to ensure its financial interest, end quote. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent to enter these two letters into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. It makes no sense to make a name for yourself creating secure devices for Western users, but to then turn around and go out of your way to make the devices in the hands of the world's most vulnerable people less secure. The time has come for us as a country to decide what matters more, preserving this toxic entanglement with China, or preserving life and liberty and the democratic ideals that make us so fortunate to begin with. I ask my colleagues to consider joining me and Senator Blumenthal in support of the Open App Markets Act to protect competition, to protect consumers, and to protect those basic human rights that the world's most powerful corporations have decided should take a back seat to access and profit. I yield the floor.